So you plan and you plan and you plan some more. You make all the right decisions. You make the right choice about your birth attendant, and then all your plans are undone one by one. So what do? How do you manage it? Well, this exact thing happened to one of my dear clients just this past week, and she has given me permission to share her story with you. So that's what today's episode is going to be. I'm going to tell you her story, and I think it's going to bless you. Let's go. Are you a Christian woman yearning for a beautiful, joyful pregnancy and birth with a focus on God, not medical tests? Are you worried the birth you want isn't possible and you're tired of being treated like an accident waiting to happen? Hey Mama, I'm Lori, host of Your Birth God's Way. I'm a certified nurse midwife now, but I wasn't always. After working for nearly 20 years in the broken maternity system, I too was in your shoes wondering how I could have the birth I wanted and that I felt God meant for me to have. I found a secret that has actually been known since the beginning of time. God's way is the best way. Spoiler alert, God made us and our babies, and He knows us best. He designed us perfectly for pregnancy, birth, and nourishing our babies after birth, if we work with His design and not against it. In this podcast, you'll learn how to be healthy and have joy during this time of life that will be over before you know it. So if you're ready to reclaim your birth and your babies for His glory, go turn on a few episodes of Bluey for that little one on your hip so you can put the focus back on you for a few minutes with me. As always, we're going to start today's episode with review time. You know I love review time because I want you to know, each and every one of you who take the time to leave me a review, how much I appreciate you, how encouraging it is to me, and how much it helps me to reach other moms like you. So I will always do this when I have the opportunity. Today's review comes from Laurel. And Laurel, I love this review because I know you know when the time frame was that you left this review. It was right after I addressed the fact that I had been accused of being a fearmonger, and you nailed it. Your title was not fear-mongering. It says, hey, yo, thank you so much, Lori, for sharing your knowledge and perspective. Your unique experiences from inside the hospital and out help everyone understand God's true design for women in pregnancy and birth. Keep sharing the truth. Thank you, Laurel, for that. And thank you to everyone who's left me a review. If you haven't, of course, I'm going to ask you right now, take 5 minutes, head over to Apple Podcasts, leave a quick, I said 5 minutes, it's like 30 seconds. Leave a quick 5-star written review. It helps me so much. And to those of you who said I was a fearmonger, if you happen to still be listening, I'm pretty sure you're not, but if you happen to still be listening, today's going to show you that there is another side to me, okay? And it's also going to show you that not all hospital is bad. And I think maybe that might even need to go back in my title. I might have to edit what I've made my title so far because, well, I think if I tell you too much right now, it's going to be a spoiler alert. So I better stop and I'll wait and I'll tell you a little bit more in a minute. Right now in the birth world, it seems like everything falls on two very different sides of things. You've got the people who are all medical who they will say you're crazy if you try to birth anywhere but the hospital because the hospital saved their baby and that's the only place you're safe. Then you have the other people who are all natural and they say you're crazy if you ever dare to go to a hospital. Look at my beautiful birth, and they post their beautiful births online, and that's great. We need to see these beautiful births. We need to see that there are births that are easy and beautiful and exactly like the mom wanted them to be. Most of them should be that way. But you don't really see much middle ground. And I think that's a little bit of a disservice because, especially in a time where there are people out there who are saying that basically all licensed midwives are out here just to sabotage your birth, whether it be CNMs, CPMs, what have you. We're all just here to throw medical things at you and sabotage your birth. You should just give birth unassisted. Everything will go exactly as you want it to. Sometimes that might be true. There are people who do sabotage births, and there are beautiful unassisted births that happen. But when we paint with such broad strokes and we don't consider the nuance of what can happen, then we're not doing a service to moms because we all know that birth doesn't always go as we plan. We know that even if it ends up being natural, it's not always according to plan. And interventions are not good when they are just blanket applied to everyone. But when they are properly applied to a very small subset of moms, they can be beneficial. When those benefits of what the test offers outweigh the risks of that test, then it can be helpful. And that's what this story is going to show you. I want to tell you the story of a sweet, sweet young lady who did everything right. She got the exact opposite, though, of what she wanted. The exact opposite birth she was hoping for, the exact opposite birth she was planning on. And yet, because she was empowered throughout the whole pregnancy to make her own decisions, even down to the very last day or so of pregnancy, she was making all her own decisions herself. And she walked away feeling that this birth went exactly as it needed to, and she has no regrets. That's what I want for you if your birth doesn't go according to your plan as well. And that's what I want to coach you on this podcast to be in a position to have all the resources that you need to make good choices and to be able to walk away with your head held high no matter what the outcome is. So it was a great story how it even came to be that I was her midwife. And I'm going to try my best to stay away from names. It's going to be hard because these people are like family to me now. But there's a delivery service that comes close to me that brings, you can order things like fruit and things by bushel boxes, okay? And I go to this, routinely from time to time when I need this or that they're offering. And the lady who does the deliveries, I've gotten to know over the last several years. Well, back in, I don't know, June or July, I was going to pick up my fruit and she was up in the box. She's always up way above me in these box trucks, handing stuff down to me. And I hollered to her and I told her, I said, hey, I'm getting back into attending births. Well, I just assumed that she knew that I'm a midwife, but I guess somehow I'd never even told her. And so I tell her that, and she kind of stops in her tracks and she looks down. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see I'm looking down. You should go follow me on YouTube, by the way, if you don't already. But you can still just listen to, that's fine. Anyway, so she looks down. And sitting on the tailgate of that truck was a younger lady. And she looked up at her mom, and then she looked at me, and she tells me that that's her daughter, who I might have met once, but I didn't really remember. That is her daughter, and she was 11 or 12 weeks pregnant, and she was essentially paralyzed. She did not know, I don't mean physically paralyzed, I mean paralyzed in what to do. She was 11 or 12 weeks pregnant. She hadn't seen anyone for this pregnancy because she didn't have a clue what she was going to do. She had had two miscarriages that just went bad. Not the miscarriage itself, but the way she was treated. And she thought, well, if it was this bad, if they treated me this bad for a miscarriage, I can't go there for a birth. And so she didn't know what to do. And so that day I stood and I talked to her quite a bit and I answered some of her questions and I gave her a card to go check out my podcast and, consider if maybe she wanted to work with me. And as time progressed and everything, she decided that she did want to work with me. And so that was the beginning of our relationship. And I began seeing her according to the normal schedule of, pregnancy and that kind of thing. Um, One little detail that I will give you that will be a little bit foreshadowing, I had told her because she lives in a very rural area, in an area that it's a little bit hard to access. It's a little bit hard to get in and out easily. And I told her, that might be something that becomes a problem at some point. We'll just, take it as it comes. But it could be an issue. Well, let's move into a little bit closer into now. So pregnancy goes normal, never a blip on the radar. Everything was completely fine. Baby's growing normally, never any signs of anything out of the ordinary. The funny thing, actually, I'll throw in here is, how I tell you all the time, don't tell people your due date and don't, because people will bother you. Don't just try to avoid telling them when you're due. Well, they hadn't heard that, and they had told people where her husband works, and those people at where he worked harassed him to the nth degree, to the point that people he barely knew from his workplace were kind of running after him, hollering at him if they had had their baby yet. And when he said no, they would say, what's wrong? Why aren't they doing anything? mean, all the things I tell you that are going to happen happened to him, not her, because she was staying home by this point. So she wasn't being bothered, but he was. And so it's funny because he says now, next time, he's not telling anybody that they're even pregnant, much less when they're due. But that's just a cautionary tale of keep it to yourself because people are all in your business. And this particular mom, as many first time moms are, now, yes, she had had two miscarriages, but when you haven't ever carried a baby to term, you're considered a first time mom because those things down there haven't ever happened before, right? So she went past 42 weeks, as a lot of first time moms do. So this poor man was so very harassed to the point that I'll tell you a little story. Actually, I'll just jump to it. I saw her here in my office on the Tuesday before the baby was born. And the whole reason they even came is I said, hey, if you want to drop by, I'll be happy to, check on the baby, make sure everything's good. Just, since we're already past, we were past 41 weeks at that point. I said, if you just want to feel like everything's good, be happy to check on everything. And she told him he was at work and he went straight to his manager and beelined it out of there just so he didn't have to deal with these people anymore. It's real. I'm laughing, but it's sad. So moral of that little story inside of the story, don't tell people your due date. Okay. So fast back forward to Tuesday. And I made myself little notes here and I think I wrote something wrong. In fact, I know that I did. I put it on the wrong line, but Tuesday is the day that I saw her here in the office. Baby sounded great. Everything was great. I didn't check her because you know what I think about that. Why would I? She wasn't in labor. So everything's good. They go on about their way. No big deal. At this point, she was 41 weeks and 6 days. So we're getting pretty close to 42 weeks, right? So she goes home, and then Wednesday night, things seem like they're starting up. In fact, by the way it sounded, I thought we were about to have a baby. I was at Bible study when she first contacted me, went home, got everything together, took off to her house. She lives about an hour from me, which is further than I usually will accept a client. But because of this special situation, I had taken her. So I drive to her house, and she really looks like she's in labor. Everything fits the picture. I didn't check her right away. She was laboring well, so I just let her go on about her business, check the baby every now and then. Um, that was it. Okay. But fast forward, I got to her house about, I don't know, 10 o'clock or so. She labored for a couple of hours and then she decides, I don't know, it was midnight or so, maybe one. She decided she wanted me to check her just to see if anything was going on. Happy to do it. Never forced it on her, but I was happy to do it. Checked her, and despite all of this labor that she seemed to be in, she was only 2 centimeters, and she was very, very posterior, meaning her cervix was still kind of pointing towards the back. It was really high as a hard check, very uncomfortable for her. So she decided that she wanted to get in the bathtub. So I let her. Now, most would argue that's too early, and they would be right if you're trying to move towards birth. But as I've told you in other episodes, water makes you more of what you are. So I wanted to see what happened. When she got in the water, did things go away or did they get more intense? And she got in the water and everything completely went away. And so after about an hour of her being in the water, when she was completely comfortable, I decided I was going to go back home. And I did. We talked about it and everything, and I did. And that was it for a while. Her labor completely went away. Normally, the progression of labor is that it kind of gets started slowly and it slowly builds and it slowly builds and it slowly builds until you eventually have a baby. In her case, it hit hard and fast out of nowhere and then stopped out of nowhere. And that's not your normal, like what you consider just the normal progression. It can happen, but it's just not the normal progression. Okay, so I go home, get a little bit of sleep. I feel pretty rough all day. Go to bed Thursday night, expecting surely I'm going to get a call tonight, right? Surely. Wake up Friday morning, no call. I'm still here. So, we'd been texting and I've been checking on her, and there was just nothing going on. So I tell her that I think it would be a good idea for me to come check her. Excuse me, check on her, do make sure baby's good and everything. Because by this point we were 41 and 1, I guess. Excuse me, 42 and 1. So I was like, maybe let's just make sure everything looks good and everything. Mainly because if she should need to transfer at some point, I want them to be assured that we have done proper surveillance to ensure baby's fine. This is the line you walk, by the way. For those of you who are out there saying, oh, she's just sabotaging by checking so much. No, 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 no. You want your clients to be treated well if they have to transfer. You want your clients to not be treated like they've been reckless. And so you want to do your due diligence just to show signs that baby is doing fine. Now, this baby was very active. There didn't seem to be any signs of anything. And so let's just put another check in a box. And that's what we decided to do. So she wanted me to come out and see her. I came to see her Friday afternoon. This was Valentine's Day. Excuse me. I'm going to drink a tea. I don't usually drink tea when I'm recording, but my throat's kind of dry today. Okay, so I go see her and she wants me to check her. And I do. And despite the fact that she had had zero contractions, essentially, I say zero, maybe, a handful, but nothing like regular, nothing that you would think would change her cervix. Despite that she'd had very little, she had actually advanced to 4 to 5 centimeters with nothing going on. So we were 2 centimeters Wednesday, and now we're Friday and we're 4 to 5 centimeters. That's great, right? But still very posterior, still a very hard check, which again, normally not a concern at all, but it ends up playing in a little bit later. So I suggest to her that we need to consider some things that maybe we can get baby in a better position, because with the labor starting hard and stopping hard, and that had actually happened a few days prior as well, that sometimes can be a sign of a baby in a bad position, and we need to do some things from the outside to try to get the baby to maybe disengage, kind of slide up out of the pelvis, and then find a new weight back down. And so one of the things I went through several different things I suggested, one being the mile circuit, some different positions, some different things for her to do with her husband, and all that kind of thing. And we did an NST, which is a non-stress test, which is where you basically look at the baby on an actual monitor, looking at heart rate patterns to make sure that the baby's showing signs that she's okay. She was great on the monitor. She was what's called reactive, had accelerations, everything was beautiful. Okay, so good. We've got time. So I leave them to do the mile circuit and other things. And I come back to my office. I think it's about 4 or 5 o'clock. I come back to my office with the plan to work for a while, thinking that she's going to call. And so I come and I do that. And about the time I was thinking about going home, she said things were really picking up. I'm like, okay, great. And so I decided to sleep in my office. And so I got a couple of little 2 hour naps through the night, and that was it. And then Friday morning, I don't know, 7, 8 o'clock, her mom calls because she's actually having the baby at her mom's house. Her mom calls and says, she's kind of frantic and I think you need to come, which I was already thinking about doing that. So I load up and head to her house Saturday morning. And I want you to know that by the time I got there, okay, so this is 8 o'clock from where my office is, it's probably only maybe a 40-minute drive. It's not quite as far. I get there and she is sitting in a recliner, nestled in, just as comfortable as can be. Gone again. Okay. Now she was still having contractions, but they weren't intense by any means. She was managing them lovely. And while that is a good thing, it was another instance of hard and fast labor that had gone away. So it's really kind of fitting into this picture that baby must not be in a great position. So we try some different things through the day. We try the mile circuit again. We try some other positioning things, this and that. And I actually ended up taking a nap at her house because I had only gotten a couple hours in my office. And so I took a nap because she wasn't in labor. She was going to eat something. Everything was good. And then after my nap, or the timeline here gets a little fuzzy, I think it was after my nap, she goes to the bathroom and she feels what she thinks is what she described as a whoosh, 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 whatever. And I thought, well, maybe baby kind of slid down. She said it felt like almost like air, but there was some stuff splattered in the toilet. And it's funny because she tells me about this from the bathroom, and I think that she's already flushed it. She tells me later, well, you never came to look at it, so I thought it wasn't a big deal. And I said, well, I didn't know it was still there. So the next time she has some of this pass, I go look at it, and it's green, and it's thick, and it's kind of mucusy, which is not what I expected it to be. And it didn't really look like bloody show. but it really didn't look like meconium either because it was mucusy. And I thought, well, what in the world? And so we got out a tester to test to see, is this amniotic fluid? Did her water break and this is just meconium? And it was. As soon as I touched the swab to it, it turned dark blue, which is an indication that the pH is the right pH of amniotic fluid. And I thought, oh, okay. There are so many decisions that you have to make during pregnancy and birth that you shouldn't have to make, but you do. We live in a world that has medicalized a beautiful, natural process, and I know it can feel overwhelming to try to sort through it all, but you do not have to walk this road alone. I created my online Christian childbirth education course to give you all the information that you need to make solid decisions you can feel confident about while helping you to honor the process God created you to walk through without feeling like you're an accident waiting to happen. I leave no stone unturned in this 8-module course with about 20 hours of education. When you join the course, you'll also get access to a monthly meeting with me where I answer your questions live. You won't have to worry about getting answers that are filtered through practice policy or insurance directives. If you don't know me, I'm Lori Morris, and I'm a certified nurse midwife with over 20 years of experience as a nurse and midwife in both the medical and natural birth world. So in this course, you'll get my experience combined with a Christian perspective without an agenda other than to help you have a beautiful birth God's way, like you deserve. You simply can't find another course with this kind of balance out there. To learn more or to sign up, go to go.yourbirthgodsway.com and click on the online Christian Childbirth Education course button. There is no other course out there like this. There are relaxation tracks in it to use before and during labor. There's tons of information about how to stay low risk while navigating the onslaught of standard medical interventions that are going to be offered to you during your pregnancy. There's affirmation cards to help you stay focused both during pregnancy and during birth. There's postpartum information. There's information about how to establish breastfeeding and so much more. Plus, there's the live question and answer sessions every month to cover anything that you might need beyond the course content. You will be prepared for pregnancy, birth, and beyond when you take this course. So come join me. Go to go.yourbirthgodsway.com right now. By this point, we're at 42 weeks and 2 days, I believe. And so now we have start and stop labor. We've tried repositioning. Nothing seems to be working. Baby's not coming down. I had checked her again and she was like 6 to 7 is what I called her. And, cervical checks are very subjective because you can't see in there. Her cervix had thinned out some, but baby was still high. And the weird thing about it was that the baby's head, usually what makes a cervix dilate really at the end is the pressure of the baby's head. Her baby's head wasn't even touching her cervix. It was almost floppy. It was like you could completely reach inside of it. In fact, the reason I checked her, now that I think about it, on Friday was I was going to offer to strip her membranes, but I couldn't even do it because her it was like it had already happened and her cervix was far away from the baby's head, which is odd. That's not your normal check. And so all of these things together, we sit down and we start having the conversation about what's really going on here. And I started to become concerned. And by the way, I could also feel what's called molding already happening a little bit, where the sutures of the baby's head were already starting to override, and I could feel that. And usually that doesn't happen until the baby's on down into the pelvis when there's more pressure to squeeze the head. And I thought, well, that's weird. There was just a lot of things that were just kind of a little, eh. Now, baby was never in any distress. Mom's not even in labor. Like nothing's going on at all. This is not emergent. We're just having a conversation. And the other little element is that a storm was coming, like what was supposed to be a bad storm, lots and lots of rain after we'd already had something like 5 inches in the previous day. And it was supposed to come through in the middle of the night. And as I look at her pad with this thick meconium, and I don't quite know what's going on to keep this baby from coming down, And their driveway is, at this point, with all that rain, essentially impassable if you don't know what you're doing. So if she should give birth, get into labor and give birth, because this is like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I really thought that when nightfall came, she would probably go back into her contracting. And if she did that and had the baby in the middle of the night, um, and we need help, how's anybody going to be able to get to us? Because there's certain things you can do for meconium, and most meconium, for whatever it's worth, is not a big deal, but thick meconium can be. And there's only so many resources you have at home. You can't, do as much as you can do in a hospital. And so, we're talking about all this, and I'm telling her all this, and she decides that it probably is a good idea to go to the hospital. Now, there is a local hospital that I've heard very good things about, where there is a doctor who I actually used to work with, who I called and I gave her the report of what was going on. And she was great. She's like, come on in. We'll see what we can do. We'll see what's going on. And, we'll take care of you. And so that's what we decided to do. Now, it took several hours before we actually got there. Again, there was no rush because mom's not in labor, baby's not in distress. Let's just take our time. So we decided to go. So that was first hard decision. This is a very prayerful family. They made the decision prayerfully, and they were okay with the decision. And we get there, and the doctor comes in, and she checks her and sees the issue with the check that I've been telling her about. She's like, "Oh yeah, I see what you're talking about." And she says, "I mean, it's probably 6, 7 o'clock." The funny thing is, because we're coming in at, 6, 7 centimeters, they had already called in extra staff because they thought she was going to come in like, really, really in labor. And she walks in looking like an induction because she was so not in labor. It was kind of funny. But so the doctor decides to give her until midnight to see if labor starts on its own. Like we get there and she doesn't even start pushing medications yet, which I was surprised. I expected them to be like, well, you're 42 and almost 3 now. You're here to have a baby. Let's make it happen. Well, no, she gave her all the time in the world. So we start doing mile circuit again. We start doing some different things with the peanut ball and moving around and walking and curb walking and lunging and doing all kinds of things. And nothing changes. And so around midnight, they decided to start just a little bit of Pitocin. And honestly, knowing what I know about labor, I'm not a fan of Pitocin, you know that, but knowing what I know, I really thought that just a little bit of Pitocin would do the trick. It did not. And so we started it at like two units, and we actually all got a nap after that. She laid with different ways on the peanut ball. I went to sleep on the chair beside her, and we all just, got a little bit of rest. And then around, I don't know, 6 o'clock or so in the morning, we kind of things start to pick up a little bit. She starts having to breathe through them a little bit, and we think, well, maybe something's going on. Well, the doctor checks her again, and nothing's really changed. Baby hasn't really come down. Cervix might have thinned a little bit more, but still nothing's changed. And we can't figure out why. And I'm starting to wonder, maybe this baby's bigger than we thought it was. Well, I'll tell you now, it wasn't. Well, spoiler alert again. So she asks to get up and go to the bathroom at one point. She'd been up and down, and she hadn't just been bedbound. They would let her move, even on Pitocin. But she went to the bathroom one time, and all of a sudden, something changed, and she, this sweet, sweet, modest girl, all of a sudden is trying to rip her gown off, and she's moaning, and she's moving around different, and she's kind of directing traffic about what she wants where and who she wants where, and this is not her personality. And I think, maybe we're gonna have a baby. And to the point that I was staying right there next to her because the doctor was gone, even though I didn't have privileges at this hospital, I was going to catch this baby if we needed to, right? And I mean, she really, really looks the part. And she stays in there, I don't know, maybe an hour or so. I don't know how long it actually was. I'm checking her with a Doppler for the nurse, who was very nervous, by the way. She was super nervous. She wanted her back in the bed where she could have her on the monitor. But bear in mind, the Pitocin's turned off at this point because she's in the bathroom. Okay, so fast forward, we get her back to the bed at some point. Actually, she gets herself back to the bed. The best line of the whole time was when the nurse says, "We really need to get you back to the bed." And she goes, "Well, you're not going to get it." She was not moving. But eventually she decided to move on her own. And she gets on hands and knees, and we do all kinds of different positionings with that. And then when the doctor finally comes in and checks her, there is no change still, despite the fact that she's been really laboring, actually looks like she's truly, truly in active labor, still nothing happening. And so we start to have this conversation about why this baby won't come down. And with all the factors that were going on, it was a little hard to make this decision because she'd been ruptured up at this point for 24 hours. There was thick meconium. She didn't have a fever, but her temperature had gone up and the baby's heart rate had crept up a little bit, which sometimes is a sign that there's an infection developing. And we just don't know why this baby won't come down. And again, I'm starting to question, is this baby bigger? Is this baby going to get stuck? Is there something going on? Is this baby trying to tell us that something's going on and she's not really going to come out this way? Now, y'all hear me say all the time, I believe that God doesn't put babies in that won't come out. And I do believe that. But something wasn't right. Something wasn't right about the way this baby was sitting in there. There's just something wasn't working right. And so we start having the conversation, and I tell them, I say, right now in our country, a third of women have babies by C-section, and nowhere near that many need it. But there are about 10-ish percent, maybe a little bit less percent of women who truly benefit from this, and it truly is a good thing for them. And we don't know who those 10% are, and perhaps your baby needs this for some reason. And I told him, I was like, at this point, given all these different factors we had playing into it, I started to believe that the safest way for the baby to be delivered was C-section. And y'all know I hated saying that. For mom, I felt like it was pretty much a toss up. It wasn't probably going to be different risk for her in the end, other than the fact that by choosing C-section now she has all that comes with a C-section. But at this point, we were starting to be concerned about the baby. Well, what's interesting is mom finally makes the decision that, yes, I think we'll just do a C-section. And dad, who had a lot of not so distant trauma in his life and was really starting to get nervous that something was going wrong and was really starting to worry he was going to lose his baby, was all on board. He was ready. And at this point, we had had zero signs of distress at all. After the call was made, after they started bringing staff in for the C-section, after everything's been decided, the baby had two incredibly low decelerations of the heart rate, one of which I thought was about to become what's called terminal bradycardia. That's where the heart rate is where it was. It does this little slope down and it never comes back up. And it happened twice within about a 10-minute or so period, and one of them lasted 5 or 6 minutes. So all of a sudden, it was like, oh, wow, we've made the right decision. Something's going on. She needs to come out. And it's so funny how God works through these things, because we didn't have an urgent or emergent reason to do it when we made the decision. But after we'd made the decision, after the staff's already on the way, and by the way, this is a hospital where the staff isn't always there for the C-section. So it took a while. After the decision was made, then we got the evidence that this is what needed to happen. So everything gets taken care of. She goes back. They give her anesthesia. We go back. Me and her husband get to go back with her. So it's not just him. I get to go as well. And baby comes out, and y'all, I want you to know, I have never in my entire career seen so much meconium. It was coating her body. It was coating her mouth. It was coating everything. Everything. And by the way, I guess I haven't explained this. Meconium, that is the baby's first poop. It's not like the poop you have. It's not gross like that. It's just the stuff that's been hanging out in the colon. It's kind of a sticky, brownish, blackish stuff. And it's usually, again, not a huge deal if some of it passes in the uterus before birth. In fact, it's common when you're post-dates. But it was, I mean, her baby looked brown and she was Caucasian. It was caked on her everywhere. I've never seen it like that before. So they get her out and they start to suction her. And y'all, the beauty of it is they never had to do anything beyond suction. They didn't have to do oxygen. They didn't have to do deep suction. They didn't have to do any of those things that could have happened. Even with that baby's heart rate going down the way that it did, she never showed any signs that she wasn't okay. And that is the blessing of this. I know some of you may be listening and think, oh, you could have given her more time, but, and could we have? Maybe. Maybe she would have eventually come down. But the signs, the way that they were, led to the decisions that were made. And I want you to know that her doctor never pushed her. She gave her every opportunity to make her own decisions. The staff was amazing. These nurses were amazing. They were not your typical L&D nurses who are judgmental or ugly or anything. They were great. The OR staff, for the most part, was amazing. There was a couple little hiccups there that I would rather have happened different, but in general, they were great. We never got a really good sign of what was keeping the baby from coming down. The doctor said that when she went to try to milk the cord, because normally she will let there be a little bit of a delay in the cord clamping for a normal C-section. But for this particular C-section, because we had, especially once she saw that there was thick meconium present, um, she wanted to get the baby suctioned before the baby had that first big gasp because we don't want thick meconium in that baby's lungs. And so she did a quick milking of the cord to try to get as much blood into the baby as possible. And in doing so, found that the cord was around the baby's leg. So maybe the baby was tethered a little bit. Also, the baby did have sutures overriding, which means like one's kind of up on top of the other. That normally wouldn't have happened unless the baby had been down in the birth canal for a while, which she never was. And she also had what's called caput, which is like a little swollen area on her head that usually means that's kind of an area of pressure on the side of her head. Usually it would be right square on the top of the pointing part. I'm pointing if you're watching the YouTube. And so obviously she was just in there a little wonky to use the professional term. Someone else called her cattywampus. But those are the only two reasons we can see that she wouldn't come down. Meconium was incredibly thick. She had almost no fluid left. And so these combinations together have led us all to believe that we have done exactly what that sweet baby needed. She was 7 pounds, 8 ounces, so not too big, just in there wrong, just in a bad position. And this mom did everything she could leading up to labor to get her in the right position, and it just didn't happen. But because she was empowered throughout, she is at home right now, happy. She is nursing like a champ. That baby is going to town. No issues at all with breastfeeding. Everything is good. The doctor took the time to do the right kind of sutures for a mama who is on her first baby and probably will want more, so that that incision has the absolute best chance to heal properly. By the way, back one more thing. She also had an infection going on that we confirmed after the baby was born. So there were several factors going on that confirmed that this was what was best for this baby. It was hard. It was really hard. But every member of that family feels that they were completely empowered to make the right decisions for their child. And everybody is home and happy and doing great. So I share this episode with you to encourage you, because I do a lot of times tell you the bad side of hospitals. And I do sometimes make it seem like you can have it the natural way, and you usually can. And I think she will next time. I hope that she will next time. But sometimes things do declare themselves. Sometimes babies tell us that there's a reason why they need to come out a different way. And this sweet baby did. And the mama still had a beautiful experience at the hospital. It was a small regional facility. It wasn't a big hospital. And that's part of why they were able to give her everything she wanted, because they had the time and the resources and nobody was rushed. So maybe that's something to consider. You know, a lot of times we're told, oh, go to the big places that have all the things. There's benefits to that. But because she was at this small county hospital, where they have taken great strides to give moms what they want. She had an absolutely perfect, as it goes, hospital experience. So there you go, all y'all that say I'm a fear monger. I just gave you a hospital story that ended beautifully, did not end the way that mama wanted it, but she wanted a happy, healthy baby and she wanted to be healthy, and that was the main goal. I hate that it happened the way that it happened, but again, I think God orchestrated it all just like it needed to be. I was able to be there with them throughout, so they didn't have to do anything alone. They had somebody that was helping them understand it all. Um, Dad, I think, is my new biggest fan because he was never alone. He was able to function in his role as dad and husband, and without having to be afraid, he could get the answers he needed. And so I just encourage you to find somebody who will give you that in your pregnancy, whether or not they end up being the one that catches your baby. Find the one that's going to help you. Find the one that's going to advocate for you. Find the one that's going to educate you and be by your side. No matter how your birth ends up, you can walk away empowered. And I think that's what happened here. I'm going to leave it at that. I don't think I forgot any important details. I probably did, but right now nothing comes to mind. I just wanted to share that story with you. So I hope that helped you. I hope that encouraged you. If you have a similar story and want to share it, hop over in our Facebook group or comment down below in the YouTube video. I'd love to hear your story as well, and I'll see you next week.
Real quick, if today's episode blessed you in any way, would you head over to Apple Podcasts and leave me a quick 5-star written review? It'll take you less than a minute, but it's the best thank you can give me, and it will help my show to reach more mamas just like you, so we can all find God's best for our families. I'll see you right back here in a few days.